Well, hey guys, you join me travelling back in time to 1963. Now you'll have to forgive me for driving a 1967 Spitfire, but we'll gloss over that one because I'm heading out towards the crime scene of the Great Train Robbery at Bridego Bridge and to Leatherslade Farm. On August 8th, 1963, driver Jack Mills took over his train at Crewe. It was a Royal Mail train headed up by a Class 40 locomotive. For him it was an ordinary night shift. He was an elderly gentleman coming towards the end of his career. Little did he know what was going to happen at Sears Crossing that night would affect him for the rest of his life. Every crime has a victim. Jack Mills was that victim. Struck round in the back of the head by one of the gangsters led by Bruce Reynolds. Bruce Reynolds was the head of the gang that led the Great Train Robbery. He'd just been acquitted for the airport robbery in which he was involved with other gang members, Charlie Wilson, Buster Edwards, etc, etc. They couldn't pull off the Great Train Robbery by themselves, so they employed another gang which was headed by Roger Cordery. Now Roger Cordery was brought in because Bruce Reynolds' gang didn't know how to stop the train. It turned out to be extremely simple, connecting a battery to a pole and using a glove to cover up the go signal. Probably the most famous member of the Great Train Robbery was Ronnie Biggs. But in actual fact, it was only by luck that he knew Bruce Reynolds, and by sheer chance that he knew a train driver. And by that chance, Bruce Reynolds needed a train driver to drive the train from Sears Crossing to Bridego Bridge. Sometime between midnight and 3 AM, Roger Cordery had done his job. Jack Mills had to stop his train between the door signal and the main signal. And the robbers took over the train. Jack Mills was then assaulted by a strike to the back of the head. Ronnie Biggs' driver couldn't do his job, so Jack Mills was then put in place. The train was separated, so the first two carriages were separated from the main part of the train and then driven on by Jack Mills under force of "you will do this or you'll get some more stick" to Bridego Bridge. Well, here we are at Bridge 127, Bridego Bridge. This is the actual scene of the Great Train Robbery. So the Class 40 locomotive would have been parked somewhere along here, two carriages behind. The Land Rovers would have been down here on the road, and within 13 minutes Bruce Reynolds and his gang had broken into the carriages and taken £2.6 million. Now 1963, that was a hell of a lot of money. So since 1963 not much has changed other than nature taking its course and this fence being put in place. Trees have grown and so have the shrubs, but it's to be expected with time. And the only indication that this is the location of the Great Train Robbery is this sign here by Network Rail saying Train Robbers Bridge. Walking down to Bridge 127, there's no plaques, no signs, and I suppose in some ways that can be considered a good thing. After all, every crime has a victim, and the victim of this crime was driver Jack Mills. So we shouldn't really be glorifying crime in any way, but this is all part of our history, and this is obviously where it all happened. Carrying on now to Leatherslade Farm, the gang's hideout from Bridego Bridge. The loot fully loaded up in the trucks, the two Land Rovers and the truck they had. They're all dressed up in military gear. There's a military camp nearby, so the gang's theory was if they were caught, they could try and blag their way out of it by saying they were a military patrol out on night manoeuvres. You always wonder what was going through their head at this moment in time. They've just carried out the crime of the century. Would they get away with it? And here we are. This is the gang's hideout at the Leatherslade Farm. The idea was to come here and stay here for a week or so after the Great Train Robbery and wait for
the heat to die off and separate the loot and all go in their own directions. Of course that didn't go to plan. They scarpered before then because the British press were on the radios, the newspapers, etc. They got frightened and went their own ways. The place was found by the police and eventually all the gang members were caught.
So after the crime, it didn't take long for Tommy Butler, Frank Williams and Jack Slipper to locate the gang members and pull them in. It was just too big a crime, and too much in the public interest, and too much to the core of the government and the country. People were very divided on the crime, about whose side they supported back in 1963. Were they on the side of the criminals, or were they on the side of the law? But deep down, I think we're all on the side of the law. Certain criminals did get away for a certain period of time, such as Bruce Reynolds and Buster Edwards, who stayed on the run for 5 years or so before getting caught. But the most notorious one of the lot was Ronnie Biggs. Now, he did actually serve 2 years of his prison sentence before escaping to Australia and then onwards into Brazil. And he remained on the run for 37 years before finally giving himself up, serving out the remainder of his time in prison, 10 years or so, before being let go on compassionate grounds. The sentences for the Great Train Robbery were anything up to 30 years. That's for the big fish of the gang. The age-old question was it worth it? Well, when Bruce Reynolds was interviewed once, he was asked that very question, and he turned around and said no, it wasn't. The victims of this crime are pretty obvious. Jack Mills, being clobbered on the back of the head, died 7 years later. He was shaking every day until his death. Obviously the British public, the Royal Mail, for losing £2.6 million. Only 400,000 was ever recovered. Such a tiny percentage. What happened to it? Who knows? Then there's Roy James. Yes, he was a criminal, but he was also a potential Formula 1 driver. Raw talent as a driver, but unfortunately gave in to corrupt ways. Potentially a wasted Formula 1 career. The daringness of the Great Train Robbery has been compared to that of a well-organised military operation. There's been a number of books written about the crime, such as Signal Red, and a number of film and TV adaptations, such as Buster, Robbery, The Great Train Robbery, A Copper's Tale, The Great Train Robbery, A Robber's Tale, and also Mrs. Biggs. But deep down, this was still a crime. And at the end of every crime, there's still a victim. And we always have to remember, crime does not pay. So I hope you've enjoyed my little trip down memory lane. And if you like what I do, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.